My name is Kevin Callahan. I'm with the University of Minnesota and the 8th Air Force Historical Society of Minnesota. Today's March 5th, 2017, and I'm here with Richard King to interview him with regard to his background and knowledge with regard to a B-29 that might have crashed in Minnesota in 1945. So let me start out. What is your full name?
Richard G. King, K-I-N-G.
Where were you born?
Born in Withrow, Minnesota, Route 3.
During World War II, when did you go into service?
I went in May of 1943.
And you were an Army Airman?
Well, at first I wasn't, no.
Okay, can you describe your career with the military?
Well, first we went into basic training in Nebraska, Lincoln Army Air Base, and then we decided we applied for cadets, Air Force cadets, and there was 6 of us, and I couldn't get in right away because of my height or something, but or weight. Anyway, they changed it for me. And after that, we went down to Florida to what they call qualified air cadets. And we were there about a month or so waiting for a college to go to. They had college training departments for the cadets. And in my case, I went down to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to Coe College. And I was there 3 months. And it was pretty heavy because I hadn't had math in high school. And it was pretty heavy, but I learned a lot. And after we left there, we left and went to Santa Ana, California. We were training to be officers, either pilot, co-pilot, or navigator, or bombardier, and it was much like West Point. And then I went down to Santa Ana, California, and there they were going to separate us to see who becomes what and whether you made it or not. And they needed gunners more than they need pilots and navigators, and so the people they kept were pretty much college graduates, which I wasn't. So they all became gunners all of a sudden. And then we were sent to Lowry Field, Colorado to bomb training, gun training, and everything to do with loading bombs and knowing. We all even studied gas, and it was quite a school. And after that, I got on a train. We were sent on a train to the East Coast. There was 22 of us on the train, and when we were on the train, I got a call somewhere, either on the train or off the train. They pulled me off of the 22 people. We were going actually to Italy to be loading bombs and guns and so forth. And for some reason, they pulled me out and put me in the turret and sight school down in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And so I was in that for about 3-4 months, and then I went to Las Vegas, Nevada, and learned gunnery. We used a B-17 to train on B-17s. And then I got onto a crew and sent to Ardmore, Oklahoma. I got a crew at Ardmore, Oklahoma. So I was in B-17s for about 4 months. And we finished training there, and they sent us to Topeka, Kansas to go to Europe. And while we were loading the plane, the war ended in Europe. So we pretty well got to drinking a little that night. I remember that.
Now, May 8th, I think, was the surrender in 1945.
Yeah.
So instead of going off to be shot at in Europe, you had to come up with another plan, or they had to come up with another plan for you.
So they shipped us then to Pyote, Texas, to B-29s, in which I always said was going from the living room to the outhouse, or from the outhouse into the living room.
Okay.
And
what do you mean by that?
well, the thrill of getting into a plane that you didn't have to have oxygen. And
yeah.
it was comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole new world, very much a new world.
Yeah.
And anyway, I trained in that for 4 months there. During that time, on my second ride on the B-29, we had an accident. And it's probably the thing that started us on this whole thing to find something out.
Mm-hmm.
And the accident, we landed hard. We claimed nobody got hurt, but some of us did. But we sort of destroyed the airplane, but it kept on the wheels, and the pilot was very good. He kept it on the wheels, but we were 13 or 14 of us on the plane. There was 6 officers on the plane. It was my second ride on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
So we finished training down there, and then I went again to Topeka, Kansas. And when we got to Topeka, Kansas, we were loading our plane, and I think I saw it on my flight hours here the other day. I think it was around August 2nd that we got to the base. And while we were loading the plane, and we even had it pretty well loaded. I remember we had a motorcycle under the floorboards, and we had some booze on board. I noticed all that was there. They dropped the bomb on the 5th. We were there the 3rd, 4th, and they dropped the 6th. The 6th they dropped the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
So the war ended right there.
Yeah. Now this would have been September of 45?
No, it was in July. Was August 6th.
August 6th.
They
Yeah,
dropped
that
the bomb
sounds
on
right.
August 6th. And then they dropped the next 2 bombs.
Mm-hmm. So there was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then about 2 weeks or something, and then they surrendered. So the war was over.
Yeah.
Okay. And you had been trained at the end of the war to be a central fire control gunner. Was that the name of your position?
It was something new on the B-29, a lot of new things on the B-29, but the news, in my part, I was armor gunner on the 17, and I was central fire control on the B-29, and which was the first computer ever on a plane. And it was run by tubes instead of chips. And my position
Vacuum tubes, yeah.
Vacuum tubes.
Mm-hmm.
My position was in the top of the plane on a where I had a.
I brought along a little model just to show people who aren't familiar with the B-29. Could you point out where you would have been on the plane and tell us a little bit about the airplane?
Yeah, well, the B-29 was the largest plane ever built at that time. The most modern plane ever built, probably one of the most popular planes yet today. And the plane was, we had a 10-man crew. This was before the radar operators. And my position was on the central fire control, was on the top of the plane, and this what they call a bubble here. And we had, the computers were located in the plane. I think there was 4 computers. And the idea of the computers is on a B-17, if you were going to shoot at something, you had to be like a good hunting. When you hunted pheasants, you had to know how to swing a gun. And it took a lot of training to catch up with the planes. And we did a lot of training on B-17s with cameras, or we did air-to-ground and we used guns or some other place. But anyway.
So you learned how to lead the target.
You had to know how to lead the target. On a B-17, you're traveling about 230, 240 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things enter into your shooting. There was a lot of missing in World War II with the 17.
Mm-hmm.
But then the ball-turret gunner, of course, there was no ball-turret gunner on this plane. But this position right here controlled these 2 turrets. My sight was that bubble there. I controlled up here these 2 turrets and these 2 turrets down here. They are there. So I controlled 4 turrets. The tail turret wasn't included on this computer.
Mm-hmm.
And in this position, if the bombardier wanted to, some people say the bombardier handled this, but in my case I handled this. If he wanted this gun and this gun, he could get them both if somebody was coming. If these scanners down here who are sitting in these little windows here want a gun, they could get the 2 bottom ones here. So if I wanted the guns, I could get these 2. So it's a lot of learning. There's a lot of books this thick on this thing to learn that equipment.
It was very sophisticated as a system.
Yeah, very sophisticated. The trouble we had with these planes is the engines were giving us a lot of problem. And this was in this country, and overseas they were doing a lot of bombing, and they had the pretty much newer planes, and we had a lot of problems. One time we burned number 3 engine off here, and one time sometimes we couldn't get the wheels up, so we had to bring them up by hand or get the bomb bay doors closed to do them. So we had some problems with them.
Could one person crank up the wheels on a
Cranking
B-29?
up the wheels on a B-29 is 835 turns.
Holy cow, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
with your heavy, you don't have as heavy equipment on as you did on the B-17 on this one, so. But it was slow, you had to have time to land.
Yeah,
But you were doing it at low altitude, but in here it didn't make any difference because this plane is pressurized.
now how would, say, the bombardier wanted to take over control of a target coming towards the plane, did you switch the control or did he have
It
control?
was my job actually he would call me on, he had throat mics, and he would ask for that turret, which we never really did get serious on that because we never left the country. But that's what you do. And if the scanner over here saw stuff coming from this way, the scanner could call me and I'd give him these 2 guns down here.
Yeah,
The tail gunner, we didn't have a 20 millimeter here, we had 250s. I have been in all the positions in this plane at one time or another, but
well, since we have a model, your model of the B-17, maybe I'll hand you that and we can compare
That one's
how
pretty-
sophisticated this one was compared to the earlier one you were trained on
thank you.
initially. Is it okay to pick this up?
Just don't hit the props.
Yeah. Oh, that's quite heavy.
Yeah, that's my son Kevin gave that to me.
Okay, and I don't know how you usually hold these.
Okay. Just
Like
I'll
that?
just- I'll just
Okay.
put it on my lap, yeah. Pretty plane, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful plane. That's a real classic.
We only had one little accident with this plane. That was all we ever had.
So when you were training, where was your position on the plane as a gunner?
On the B-17, I started out, I was armor gunner, so I had charge of the planes, but I was top turret gunner, and we did a lot of shooting with cameras because you can't shoot at fighter planes coming through with guns or you'd knock them down. So, but the fighters would have a period when they'd come to us and they'd tell us we're going to have a training deal, and they would come, they'd fly by us in every position, and we would study the film afterwards. But anyway, after the last month, I studied to be a toggler, where I rode up here for about a month, where I dropping practice bombs on the lead plane. There was 2 planes on here, one in the, he was in the center. And when he dropped, we just clicked him off. It was pretty easy, but it was so cold up here. It was the worst part of it. It was cold or it was hot. I have 160 hours in this airplane.
Now the toggle switch, was it something you pressed or it was like
All I had to do was watch him. That's really tough. And when he dropped, I dropped. We were just dropping 100-pound bombs with like 8 pounds of dynamite.
Yeah. And the idea was that you didn't need a bombardier on all of the airplanes
Well, they shouldn't
because
have had one ever. Really, they should have never. I don't think they ever needed the 2.
Yeah.
The lead bombardier for the whole unit was dropping the bomb.
as long as the planes behind you could see the first the plane in the formation, and when it dropped, you could press the button.
But this was a wonderful. You look back at your props, actually, and you could see the whole world here. You're riding right out here in the middle of the world in a bubble.
Yeah,
Sort of very interesting place.
yeah, great view.
You
But-
didn't land in any of these turrets. Everybody was out of the turrets when we landed. So.
But it was cold and unpressurized, so you were wearing gear.
We wore so much clothes you couldn't move. Besides your harness and your heated suit and you got goggles, and you've got on a throat mic, and you got up from your underwear to your electric suit to your heavy suit to the big heavy leather coats. It was very hard to move around, and the plane was smaller than you'd think when you get inside of it.
So it would be like heavy winter gear in a tiny little space.
Yeah, you
if-
can't hardly
imagine
move.
this.
Like, one of the things I don't talk about, I talked about it once when we had this, is that nobody ever talks about how did you eat or how did you go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I won't talk
imagine.
about it.
Well, let's turn then. I'll take this is quite heavy. I'll take this from you so you don't have to have that on yet.
That's pretty plain, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful. And it's a nice model. That's really outstanding. Okay, so directing your attention then to 1945, there was an accident which was involving one of the B-29s, and you have personal experiences, I understand it, having been on the airplane that may have gone down in Minnesota, which is being looked at right now in terms of trying to find the residual, whatever's left of it. So can you describe where you were and when this was and what you remember?
I've been thinking out about a little bit how to start this because we lived in Stewartville for quite a few years, and we moved our stuff from the attic and we moved it down there. And 50 years after we had been in the service, I took a barrel downstairs, a wooden barrel downstairs from the attic that I never knew that my folks, I had been sending stuff home to my folks and I didn't remember that. And I looked in this barrel and everything you can think of, I've got it all here, it was in that barrel. And so I was looking through this stuff and that come out of that barrel, and I found the Rattler, which was our base newspaper out at Pyle. And in there I found an accident that I was in. There was, and I found the accident I was in, and so in all of my looking around, I finally went to, I saw one day, I don't know if I saw it on the TV or whether I read it in the paper, that if you go to accidentreports.com, in 1996 they released all the information on accidents within the United States. So I saw that, and I saw this accident I had, so if you send accident reports, so I did right away. And in about a week, I got my whole 40 pages on the small accident I was in. And that just amazed me. So after I got that, I'm looking in the Rattler again, and I find another accident that happened in Big Fork, Minnesota. So I put the two together and I thought, well, I'll look that accident up. And after I looked it up, they sent me 60 pages on the accident in, we think, Red Lake. So we took this, those two together, and I got the idea of calling up the Grand Rapids Historical Society. So I did. I emailed them, and got an email back that we have all that information for $5. We'll send it to you. So they sent me the information on that accident. So the lady up there, I'm trying to think of her name, I don't want to forget it here. But anyway, Barbara Adams was there, and she sent me the information. After I got the information, I got to talking to her about it. It was very interesting to me. It was very interesting the way they bailed out and what happened that night, and all that information. And we started looking into it, and that was the same plane that I had been on 4 days before. This was on the 14th, and on the 10th, we took that plane off for a flight for 14 hours to go out over Minnesota, which was very unusual. And we were going to buzz the farm. The captain was very strict, but he said he would do that. And it was a 14-hour training mission. We had an instructor pilot on board. And we got up in the air, and the plane smelled gas so bad, you're always afraid of an explosion. We went right down. We were up about 50 minutes on the trip, and we we had to cancel our flight. So the plane was put into repair, and 4 days later, this crew took the plane. And they were taking the same flight we had. They'd say it went out of Duluth, but it didn't go out of Duluth, it went out of Puyallup. And we took that plane, so anyway, we didn't take the flight, they took the flight, and they ended up where they all had bailed out at Big Fork, Minnesota.
So these were training missions to train the crew? And
Yeah, you have an instructor pilot on board, and you're taking, I had two 14-hour flights, and that would have been one of them. We took one the next, not long after. But it wasn't over Minnesota. This is the only one over Minnesota. I had written two of my sisters to watch out for a B-29 coming over. We're going to buzz the farm, so I'm pretty familiar with the whole thing. And anyway, Barbara Adams and I worked on making up an article to put this in the paper. And so she had all the information, and then I put in there, I was the one that told her all about it. We got the thing straightened out. So after the article was written, a week later, I got a call from a lady, and she said, "Are you Mr. King, the one that has this article in the paper?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "My husband is very excited to meet with you." So Kevin L.Callahan got on the phone, and he had been looking for this plane. He had the same 60 pages I had in up Red Lake for 10 years, since 2004, has been searching for this plane. And he's been using sonar, and he'd been using side scanning, and he had built a boat that was maybe a 30 by 40 foot boat, big. It only had 96 barrels on it. And he'd been searching for it all this time, and he was very excited. And what had happened, basically, what he told me, and to make a long story short, is that they had all the information of how they bailed out and over the lakes they bailed out and which direction the plane was going, and it was going towards Red Lake. And when they bailed out, in order to bail out from the nose, they had to either go through one window or they had to go through the nose gear. So they brought their nose gear down. They had a terrible gas leak. I didn't tell you that. They had a terrible gas leak. There was even gasoline in the Bombay. And that was the problem we had with the plane. It was a gas leak was the problem. And they were starting to pass out. And so finally some they threw out of the plane and so forth. They all landed safely. They were found within 18 hours. So it's a big, long story. And they ended up being partied and everything. I mean, everybody was really, this was a big deal in the town of, I don't know, this town that they were in, yeah, I think it was in, because there's two other towns also had news on this.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that night about 12:30, they were flying at 9,000 feet, I believe, when this all happened. And they put it on automatic pilot and sent it out, and they all bailed out. Well, he told me the story that same night at 12:30, the family that was up on Red Lake, I don't know what little town that was, claimed that they heard something go over the house that same night, and it almost shook them out of bed. It was so noisy, it went right over the top of their house. And there was a B-25 pilot in that house, and he'd been wounded, I think, but he was there along with the family. And the next morning they were talking about it in the coffee shop, and so he got right on it. Kevin L.Callahan. Mm-hmm. And Kevin is the main man here. He's done all the work.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of work.
So the person that was in the house that the plane flew over, he had a background having been in B-25, so he knew the sound of different engines having been on airfield and so forth. And then it's your understanding, and again this is sort of hearsay, but your understanding was he identified it that night as he thought it was either a B-25 or a B-29?
Yeah, he said it's either a B-25 or a B-29, and so he wasn't a beginner. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the people are still living who was in that house was 6 years old at the time. And we can't seem to get in touch with them.
So this is about around midnight roughly, and the windows are shaking, and it was a memorable event apparently, at least from the descriptions you're getting secondhand or third hand.
It was very scary. It was right close to their house.
Yeah. Now you furnished me with a copy of this 60-page report, and one of the things I found interesting was it indicated there was 1,400 rounds of 50 caliber machine gun ammunition and 20 practice bombs on the airplane at the time of the flight. Is that consistent with what you remember, or do you remember what kinds of things you brought on planes when you were flying?
I didn't, later on, I knew how to load bombs and everything, but later on, as we got further into training, we didn't load ourselves anymore. They were loaded by guys that loaded our guns too. I mean, they loaded our ammunition. And each turret carried 600 rounds. So we had about 3,500 pounds of ammunition and maybe carrying 5,000 to 10,000 pounds of bombs. And they were small, you know, they're loaded with sand and little dynamite.
About 3 pounds or something.
Yeah, I thought it
black
was 8
powder.
pounds, but I
Yeah.
don't remember right.
So this, even on training flights, you would have some things on board that were either ammunition or a small practice.
Especially on a training flight where you somewhere we would drop those bombs. I don't know where we would drop them, but the bombardier would get his shot at it, and the gunners would they'd probably run fighters up for somewhere southwest, and you know, when we did actual shooting, we went out to a range somewhere and did the shooting, you know, or bombing. But
when the flight that you were on turned around, was there ever any discussion that you remember about where the source of the leaking gasoline was at the time you were on the airplane?
I didn't really know what the source was when we landed because it was pretty quick and it went into repair. But later on, I think, the more I think of it, the reason it didn't get repaired is I think the leak was up between the wings. The tanks were up there between the wings. There was some valve, I think, between that didn't close or something, or I don't know. But the engineer that went out there to try to do it passed out. And he came back out, and everybody, they opened the windows and nothing worked. And finally...
This was on the later flight, not the one you were on.
Not the one I was
Yeah.
on.
So he's in there trying to figure out what's going on, and gets overcome by all the heavy fumes.
Yeah, and he wasn't supposed to be in there he was supposed to be there with an oxygen mask. You go anywhere, if you're going into bomb bay like he should have had his oxygen mask on. But it didn't always work that way. One guy they threw out because he didn't have he was unconscious.
He had been overcome by the gas fumes. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the attitude of this plane, from your reading, we're going by the documents now. From your reading, the pilot had put it on autopilot, and then all the people had parachuted out of the airplane. It's on autopilot, and apparently the front wheel is down.
As far as I know, the front wheel was down because I can't remember right because I never bailed out on the nose, but we normally should know that because we were all trained on that, but I don't remember. But I think they have to put it down to bail out for the pilot and co-pilot because the navigator and bombardier are sitting way down in the nose. And I think they had a window down in there where they could take it out. But they tried opening the windows to get the air clear, and it just made it worse. And everybody back of the bomb bay you have a tube that runs the top of the bomb bay that you go through. Everybody back there was always in contact with your throat mics and knew what was going on. So those in the back bailed out the door, more or less.
So the plane goes down in the middle of the night, and as I read it, it looked like they looked for about 3 days. The war had just finished.
No, it doesn't finish then. It was July 14th.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It hadn't finished yet, but it only went on for just July, what was it, July what did the war? It was August.
Yeah, August the bombs were
Uh,
dropped, and September was when they finally signed the documents.
But
on
anyway,
the
they
treaty.
went there and they looked 3 days, and for 30, 40, 50 years, we all thought that the plane had gone out west somewhere, and it either hit a mountain or it ran out of gas. It had, I think, around 4,000 gallons of gas left. And at that height, it was going to hit something somewhere.
Mhm.
And the most obvious of all is they would head it out to the same route they were on, and it went right over Red Lake. Now, so far, we have a group of people, as you know, you're one of them,
Mhm.
and we've done a lot of work. And accidentreport.com is still the best thing we ever did. We really got all the information from them.
Yeah, I have been looking at satellite photographs just to check to see if there's anything that would show up as a possible search site on the ground.
Yeah, you're in the right business.
Well, yeah, I haven't been up there personally, and we've got other members of this group that have been up there recently. John Aldrich, for example, went up with Bob Shima within the last month or so, and did some sonar work. Kevin Hellblad reported he did find something that might have been 100 feet long last summer.
He dragged it. He dragged it with his. He had an anchor he had made, and he dragged it. And he thinks he found it.
Yeah. Now the boats up there usually aren't 100 feet long, as I understand it. That's a really big boat. So whatever that 100-foot object, if that's accurate, it's possible it's a wing. We don't know. This is all preliminary, and it hasn't been relocated again. So it's still in the search phase, as I understand it. But your recollections are significant because you were on the plane in question only 4 days before the thing had this mishap.
I was very disappointed, so I really do remember it because we actually started this same 14-hour trip, and we were going to buzz the farm.
If your pilot had made a different decision, you could have been one of the people who had to bail out of that airplane.
Yes, yeah.
Also,
If he kept on going.
if you look at it in 20/20 hindsight.
They had actually, I understand they even had inches of gas, and even the scanners in the back were passing out from the gas.
Yeah.
And they looked at it seems like one of them could see in the Bombay, he saw in the Bombay, and he saw the gas in the Bombay, one of the guys in the back, one of the scanners.
One of the considerations then, because we're not talking about like present aviation fuel, which is a kind of kerosene, this is 100-octane gasoline, isn't it?
Yeah.
So those fumes are pretty overpowering if you get it in a concentrated small area like
Yeah.
inside the interior.
Everything that would spark had been cut off. They cut off anything that would spark, but you can't cut off everything.
Well, it's a dramatic thing to read as to what these people did inside the airplane when this all happened, and it was a matter of life or death and making decisions quickly.
The pilot was very, very good about. In fact, the thing about it I didn't mention here is that after their trip, I was still in Pyote, and the whole crew came back to Pyote, and they got treated very nicely up there. And they come back by train or car. I don't know how they got back. And I talked to all of them after they got back, not the officers as much as the enlisted men, and they told me all about it. So I'm pretty close to it,
Yeah.
And we have started to look a little bit. My son, Jeff King, has been searching, trying to find the people that were on the plane that day. I don't know if there's any living or not. I don't know.
Well, this was very close to the end of the war, and then you continued and were discharged, or did you have to stay in the service for a while?
After we left Topeka on the B-29s, they flew us down to, trying to think where I went first. I think the Davis-Monthan field. No, we flew down there on a B-29, I think. We flew to Davis-Monthan, and we flew there. I went on a couple of trips at Davis-Monthan field with the B-29. Then we came back and went to Pratt, Kansas for about 14 hours, and I was discharged there down to Florida to take care of the people coming out of the service. I worked with the officers there for discharging people from the service.
Mhm.
A lot of them were coming from the South Pacific pilots, and they were a tough lot, I'll tell you. And they had had a rough time in Guadalcanal and on that area.
Yeah, yeah. And I imagine they were happy to be done and going home.
So the good Lord kept me for some reason. But I have a lot of kids that are thankful.
How old are you now,
I'll
today?
be 93. I'm 93. I'll be 94 in June.
And you have a large family, is that right?
I have 10 kids and 36 grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
So there will,
So they're pretty happy about this whole thing.
yeah. Well, great. And then after the war, what did you do? You were in business? You had your own business, or you did various things?
Well, it's sort of strange because Interstate Lumber Company is this town, and I went to work for them, and I met my wife through that, and that's we got married. We were in Whiteberry in the heating business. Then I went into wholesale heating for many years, and then we started our own business, and fabricating machinery, and we've been very fortunate there. My boys are in it now. So we got an interesting family.
Okay, thank you. I very much appreciate your giving me the opportunity to record your recollections.
Well, I
today.
appreciate the work you do. You do a lot of work with the 8th Air Force.